And greetings, everyone, and welcome to Buzz for Good, where we talk all things nonprofit, the people they serve and the good they do. And today, I am buzzing about democracy. Specifically, an organization founded in Blacksburg, Virginia, whose mission and title is Defending Democracy. Defending Democracy was founded at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Blacksburg, chiefly in response to what organizers say is the increasing authoritarianism of the second Trump administration. And so on today's Buzz for Good, I talk about that with one of its founders, Dr. Jim Boland, but also push him on his thoughts on what some on the right might accuse Democrats of in the state of Virginia, the attack on democracy brought about by their redistricting plan to create more gerrymandered and Democratic-leaning congressional districts. So regardless of your political affiliation, I hope you will listen to this episode with an open and curious mind. Now this week, we also started production on a new episode of our TV show, Buzz, starring On Our Own of the Roanoke Valley, a drop-in center in Roanoke that is open 365 days a year for people struggling with addiction and mental health issues. So after my conversation about defending democracy, I will revisit the conversation I had with On Our Own's executive director to learn more about the nonprofit's work and her personal journey from addiction to inspiration. My name is Michael Hemphill. I'm the creator and host of the TV show Buzz that airs every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. on Blue Ridge PBS, where we feature the great work of nonprofits and the marketing professionals affiliated with the American Advertising Federation of Roanoke who donate their time and talent, helping these life-giving organizations achieve more buzz. And you can find out more through my website, buzzforgood.com. That's Buzz, B-U-Z-Z, 4, good.com, as well as our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and TikTok, all at Buzz for Good. And now, here is my conversation with one of the founders of the organization, Defending Democracy. Well, it is my pleasure to welcome to Buzz for Good, Jim Boland, who is a retired professor emeritus at Virginia Tech and one of the individuals who created Defending Democracy. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Michael.
Before we get into Defending Democracy, I'm just curious to know, what is your story and how you even began thinking about, this work that you were engaged in?
Well, my academic work had long been in kind of public policy of various things, and then I went into administration. But my interest in this really stems from what I saw as a concern after 2016 in terms of an increasing kind of movement to authoritarianism or autocratic kinds of approaches to governance in this country, and thought we needed to speak out and basically kind of educate people to what a number of folks, both in Blacksburg and really nationally, see as a movement that is a threat to democracy, a threat to our liberal democracy. That's really what got me interested in that. I taught a couple of classes in the Unitarian Universalist Church related to that. And I taught a large class in what's called LLI, Lifelong Learning Institute, which is an outreach kind of program for educational programs for people over 55. So I've taught in that, and actually I'm teaching one this semester in that along subject matter along these lines. So it's kind of evolved from what was professional interest into now what has become more a kind of personal passion, I guess you might say.
Well, here we are, 2026. We are celebrating the 250th anniversary of the birth of democracy in the United States. And I mean, you would think that democracy does not need defending after 255 years.
Well, you would think so, but in a number of scholars, and if you look historically, I think this is true. Um, Democracy, because of the freedoms that it advocates and we honor and cherish, make it an opportunity for those who want to uh, or those who seek a more autocratic kind of approach to governance. It gives them the opportunity to voice their interests. And what we have seen over the last, really, I would say, since 1970, an increasing kind of volume to those voices that want to challenge the kind of openness and freedoms that we so cherish. But you can go back, to the Gilded Age back in the late 1800s, and you saw a similar kind of threat to democracy emerging that eventually, was quelled because of some public revolt against it and so on. So it's almost endemic to democracies that people are going to want to seek a more what they claim efficient form of governance.
Well,
And
mhm,
authoritarianism gives you that, right?
sure. I'm also mindful of the fact that I think that's perhaps a white perspective in our country
Yes.
that our African American brothers and sisters and those who are not white have been combating this you know threat to democracy since the
Yeah.
founding of our country.
Yeah. There's nothing perfect about our democracy. It never has been.
Yeah.
Probably never will be. We are all, I think even our founding fathers, if you go back and read what they were saying, is they viewed the Constitution as a start, but it was imperfect and it needed to be changed. And we've wrestled with those changes over time and have added to expand the number of people who participate in it. It's still imperfect and we need to do more.
Yeah.
One of the unfortunate things that the founding fathers did is made it very difficult to change the
Hmm.
Constitution. As a nation, we are probably the one democracy that has most difficulty in changing our Constitution. Other countries do it much more easily than we do. And so we get stuck into kind of patterns of behavior and thinking that make it very difficult to broaden the scope of democracy and honor what I think the founding fathers really meant in terms of it's an imperfect form of governance. We are always trying to increase and open up democracy. It's an ongoing kind of challenge.
Yeah.
And to some extent, that's what we see in defending democracy is about
Hmm.
ensuring that the freedoms that were originally cast within this country and have evolved over time continue, but at the same time, ensure that they continue and at the same time expand them to others who really are feel left out in terms of what's going on in our government system.
Well, you mentioned that the framers of our Constitution made it very difficult to change the Constitution or to amend the Constitution through amendments. But I think the framers also envisioned the system that they had created as kind of being self-governing. That if you had a autocratic tendency in one form of government, in this case the executive, that the other two branches, the co-equal branches, would be a check on that. And uh, I think what defending democracy is about is saying that, well, maybe unfortunately, that's not happening from your perspective.
I think that's true. I think it's always a danger when one party or the other, or one ideology or another one, has total control over the three branches of government. And it's not just, let's say, Republicans. I mean, people would argue back under Franklin Roosevelt, the same thing happened, and you saw tendencies of autocratic rule at that time.
Hmm.
So there's that danger that there's not. We built a government that had checks and balances, but if those checks and balances don't work, then you have a real problem.
Yeah.
One of the one of the things that we've seen about autocratic governments around the country is once they get established, it's very difficult to break them up
Hmm.
because they now control all the levers of power and can change voting regulations to ensure they stay in power like they did in Hungary, or they can stack the courts, uh, or they can remove authority from the legislative branches, all
Hmm.
of which basically, you know, centers and concentrates power in the executive branch, and that's
Yeah.
a real.
Well, and of course, you're talking about on a federal level. Some would argue that what is happening currently in Virginia on a state level is a form of single party, quote, autocratic or anti-democratic government. And I want to circle back around to that later in the conversation. But first,
Okay.
I want to stay focused on kind of
Okay.
the inspiration for what you had in creating Defending Democracy. And once again, joined here on Buzz for Good by Jim Boland, who is a retired professor emeritus from Virginia Tech, who is on the steering committee of an organization called Defending Democracy, which is connected with the Unitarian Universalist Church of Blacksburg. Uh, you share with us some of your background and how you got to this space. What is the origin story of Defending Democracy?
Um,
You mentioned 2016 and the election, the first
but
election of
yeah,
Donald Trump.
what happened was, I think 2.5 years ago, there were a number of people, myself included, within our congregation that were concerned about what we saw as a slipping away from some of the freedoms, some of the basic tenets of democracy within this
Hmm.
country,
Such as.
such as restricting the voting, such as kind of views on race, such as views on gays, such as views on trans, etc., were being challenged. And the early stage rhetoric surrounding the election of 2024 was not very comforting. So the congregation passed a resolution. I want to say unanimously, but I think there was one vote against it out of, I don't know, 200 or 150 people or something like that. That we would create this group called and support a group that was principle was to defend our freedoms under a democratic society. At the same time, I had taught a course on authoritarianism in our lifelong learning program, and there were about 70 in there, and a lot of energy out of that course. So those two things kind of merged together, and we had a large, if you want to call it, plenary meeting of about 150 people,
Mm.
not just from the congregation, but from the community at large, who wanted to move forward on this.
Hmm.
And it was out of that this group called Defending Democracy was created. It actually had members on the steering committee from Roanoke, and it had people other than Unitarians on the committee, as it does now. It is not totally Unitarians. There are people from other groups who are on the steering committee,
Hmm.
but are all kind of focused on this issue. So we have held a number of events. We held a number of events before the election. We've held a number of events since the election that related to what we call defending democracy, one of which was basically telling people you need to get organized and get active. So we held a big community organizing meeting where I think we had something like 25 to 30 local organizations, from the League of Women Voters to environmental groups to NAACP. Held a big meeting, had them there. People had an opportunity to sign up. The whole pitch was get involved, be active. If you have a concern, don't sit there. You got to be active, not just join us. But there are a lot of other community organizations out there that require participation and
Hmm.
involvement. And so that was one meeting. We had another large event, and most of these events have had about 100 to 120 people. We had another event that said basically before the governor's race in Virginia to kind of protect democracy, get out the vote. Here's what thinking some of the issues. If we bring panels together of people who are experts on issues like public education, immigration, housing, etc., all of the issues that concern people in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the kind of disheartening and I think events that have happened or the process that has happened, which creates a really fertile incubation for authoritarianism in this country, is that the trust in government in the United States has gone way down.
Yep.
Not only in government, but in many of our democratic institutions, like the media, like public education, the Congress, the courts, etc. There isn't one sector of the federal government where more than half the people say they now trust that institution, which is very, very disheartening, but in the same time, very frightening, because all it takes then is somebody to come by and say, I can fix that. And I am, give me power and I can fix it. And so it becomes a fertile ground for people who seek and advocate a more authoritarian form of governance.
Again, joined here on Bus for Good by James Boland, who's a retired professor emeritus from Virginia Tech and is on the steering committee for the creation of an organization called Defending Democracy, which is connected with the Unitarian Universalist Church of Blacksburg. And I'm curious, what are the tenets of the Unitarian Universalist Church that, may have led to the support or the inspiration of defending democracy?
Well, number one, I think, is service. It has a very strong service component.
Okay.
View is that the organizing central theme is about love and how you reach out to others in empathy and express that in a loving way. It's about rational thinking in terms of think through processes, open discussion of it. Don't hold any kind of ill will to those who may have differences of opinion from you. So it's basically creating it around it is a community covenant. That is, we're in this together. We need to sponsor a loving community that helps one another, that looks out for one another, and is based on the rule of law, rational thinking, and moving from that. So that's why I think there's an attachment to, or why defending democracy came out of that kind of faith community.
Mm-hmm. Based on the people who've been, I guess, attending or attracted so far to defending democracy, I mean, is there any conversion taking place, or is it mostly like a preaching to the choir?
I would say it's probably more of that latter.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple of concerns that we have, that we don't reach out, although we've tried to reach out. And when we hold our events, we make it open. For example, we're holding an event on April 2nd called Protect the Vote, looking at voter suppression. Mm-hmm. And we've invited both parties to attend. We've invited community groups to attend, to engage in a conversation. Mm-hmm. The other concern, in addition to kind of speaking to the choir, is, I would say 70 to 75% of the people who participate and are involved in this have white hair like me. And so there's an older community. Yeah. Reaching out to the younger community is something that we would really have been trying to do, in part because if you look, and I can't say this is true for the Blacksburg area in Virginia Tech, but nationally, what you find is that basically, the majority of young people don't think democracy works for them, because a lot of the issues that they are really strongly supporting, like climate change, nothing gets done.
Right. Well, there's climate change. There's high unemployment or underemployment. There's
There's
There's really affordability. They're not buying homes. You know,
inequality in wealth. All of
and
those issues
right.
are very important to young people, and they don't
Yeah.
see anything being done.
Right.
And in fact, if you look again nationally at surveys, the group that tends to be most critical of democracy tends to be the young because they've lost complete faith in our ability to
Right.
solve our problems.
Yeah. Well,
Really,
I don't know if they lost faith or if they even had faith to begin with, because this is the country that they've grown up in.
yes,
You
yeah.
know.
They haven't
And
seen it. They haven't seen it work effectively
right.
to deal with these issues.
Yeah.
So that's a real concern thinking long range. It's not that they're preaching authoritarianism, it's that they just don't see things getting done.
Yeah.
And until democracy demonstrates that it can address their needs in an effective manner, then it will happen. It's not by coincidence, I think, that one of the individuals that young people rally around is Bernie Sanders. I mean, he
Hmm.
speaks to these issues, and the younger folks see that, as being important.
Yeah.
For example, we had one of the groups that came to one of our events was the Socialist Party of America. It was mostly young people, because they don't see anything being done on the issues that they find to be important. And so thinking of the future of the country, that's really kind of a concern, I think.
Absolutely. Well, again, Jim Boland here on Buzz for Good with Defending Democracy, which is connected with the Unitarian Universalist Church of Blacksburg. And you've been talking about authoritarianism and how this is really the first Trump administration is what in part inspired the creation of Defending Democracy. Uh, and then really kind of got into high gear in 2024 with his election to a second term.
Yeah.
And um, what specifically in this second term has given you and other organizers with Defending Democracy such pause or concern?
Um, that's a great question because there are a number of things. But if I had
Mhm.
to point to one thing, I'm,
I,
I'm
I,
greatly
I'll give you three things
okay.
if that helps.
Thank you. One thing is, and this is not the most important, but it's one of those three, is I think we're seeing a lack of um, support for the rule of law. That is, things tend to be decided outside of normal rule of law. We point fingers, we bully, we make accusations, and in fact, what happens then is once the courts get involved, basically, they say no, you can't do that. But then what happens is they proceed anyway. So if you look at the whole issue of enforcement of immigration, and I think everybody on all sides believes that immigration is an important issue and needs to be, um, uh, you know, clearly defined in terms of who is and cannot be a citizen. But it's going outside the law to kind of bring in people who you think either because they have the wrong name or because of the color of their skin or because of the job they work in are not legal. You're stepping outside the rule of law, and that's, I think, a really kind of critical issue. The other thing that I find very, very troubling, and I think it will get more troubling in the future, is I think privacy and security of our privacy is being challenged like no other time in our history. In large measure because we now have the technology that allows surveillance
Mhm.
to occur.
That
And if
that
you
alone
stop,
is not that alone is not a product though of this Trump administration. I mean, that's been a concern for the ever since the dawn of the internet.
except what's happened is that all of a sudden, if you notice, in the Trump administration, that the cadre of technology folks has shifted from basically what they used to do is be very supportive of kind of Democrat. A number of them now have all shifted over to supporting Trump.
Yeah.
And so the Bro group, the Bro technology group, is very supportive because they have and very concerned about widen the use of the technology that they have developed and giving now to the government. So again, AI is just the most recent example that you have to think about of what that means. Think of all the data we have collected on. There's a great book out. It's about 6-7 years old now by an author by the name of Shoshone Zuba called Surveillance Capitalism, which basically says we started this process of surveilling people, not in the government level, but in the business level.
Mm-hmm.
Google, Facebook, Twitter, etc., collecting all sorts of data and selling it. That's how they made their money, and they still do. So these big data centers that everybody worried about, realize that they're all data on many of us. So we now have the capabilities because of technology. If you get the wrong person in charge of that, is massive surveillance capabilities. And you're beginning to see some of that pop into the news where people are saying, all of a sudden I'm getting letters from Department of Justice wanting to know why I'm doing this or that. That's a real concern. And if that grows, if we don't put safeguards out there for this, I think it's going to be a real a future that we're not going to be very happy with. Right.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned, I guess, immigration or the identifying of other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you mentioned kind of I guess maybe the weaponization of technology that the big tech companies are aligned now with more with the Trump administration.
Let me give you an example of the latter one.
Sure.
The one person that has probably greater control on what happens in the war between Ukraine and Russia is Elon Musk.
Mm-hmm.
Because of his satellites.
Yep.
They provide the link for intelligence on both Russian and Ukraine side. If he cuts off one side or the other, it's a major blow. And he's threatened to do that, and he's gone back and forth on that. To put that kind of power in the hands of a non-elected official is, I think, really, really a future that we don't want to consider. Right? Mm-hmm. So those are two: the rule of law and the technology, I think. I'm also very concerned, which sounds little bit strange coming out of the Unitarian group, a little bit concerned about the rise of white nationalism, and which has white Christian nationalism and a label that goes with it, mm-hmm. and what that means. We have public officials, and I won't name them, but you know who they are, who basically believe in dominionism. That is, we should be run by the rule of the Bible and other kinds. That should be the guiding principles mm-hmm. for us. All right, as a country, not as individuals. That's a big difference, I think.
Well, the Bible's a good book. There, if you follow,
and religion is a personal thing, and it needs. Right. But when that becomes what you turn to make decisions with regard to governance in society, I think that's a concern. The irony of it is that for a long time, we've heard people, particularly on the right, talk about Muslims and Sharia law, and that's something we should be against. That is, where religion determines what the legal framework is for making decisions. But does that mean that you can now switch it over to dominionism and it's all right? No, you got this conflict, I think. Mm-hmm. So that's another concern. Anyway, that's three.
Okay. Oh, that's good. That's good. And again, joined here on Bus for Good by Jim Boland, who helped create an organization called Defending Democracy, affiliated with the Unitarian Universalist Church of Blacksburg, and was created in part due to the views of the rise of authoritarianism in our country. And what so the Defending Democracy people come together, they talk, for someone who perhaps is aligned with your thinking about the threat of authoritarianism in our country. What is, or even someone who perhaps, looks at, say, a current Democratic administration in, say, the state of Virginia, who is concerned about that, but just for the exact opposite reasons as you. What is something realistic that you and your organization encourages people to do?
Well, if you had to name one thing, it's engage. Be engaged.
Yeah.
You vote at the local level. You vote at the state level. You vote at the federal level. You engage in debate. You understand the issues, and you get involved. You work with your legislative people. You work with local administrators. You know, they used to say the motto of the Washington Post used to be democracy dies in darkness.
Mm-hmm.
I would change that to say democracy dies in apathy. That if you're apathetic and sit back and just kind of criticize and look at what's going on, you're not contributing to solving the problems.
Mm-hmm.
So engagement to me is what we're all about.
Okay.
And should be what citizens of the United States are all about. We all, as I said before, one of the things, kind of tenets of Unitarianism is in kind of civil engagement, civil debate, civil discussion, recognizing that people have different views, and we talk about them, and we maybe even argue about them, but we do it respectively. We do it on the basis of not ideology, but on the basis of what we think are factual kind of substantive issues or substantive dimensions of the issues, rather than just what I used to call so's your mother kind of arguments, So anyway, that's
all right. So engage. Anything else that's constructive? Because what I always struggle with is what is something meaningful, impactful that I can do in the face of some kind of injustice in the world, whatever it might be. What is something that, other than just take to social media and post some screed about it, which never accomplishes anything, because again, you're either preaching to the choir and get a bunch of likes from them, or you're just ignored by those who you may not agree with. So what's something else like meaningful that you encourage people to do?
Organize and go see your Congress people.
Mm-hmm.
Legislators, whatever
Right.
they may. Educate yourself, and I'm not a big fan of social media. I don't have a Facebook. I don't do that. But I think you can educate yourself and talk with your neighbors,
Mm-hmm.
engage with those around you. They back in 2024, there was a national group that basically talked about democratic or democracy groups, that neighborhood group, keep the conversation going. Mm-hmm. I have friends and relatives that don't vote the same way I do, but I'm not, they're great people. And we have sometimes a very lively discussion about what the issues may be. And in fact, sometimes they change my mind and sometimes I change their mind. So as I say, it's apathy, the failure to engage, the failure to educate yourself on the issues is what will, what gives rise to a society that is susceptible to taking orders rather than governing.
Mm-hmm. So we've been, I think, mostly talking about things happening on the national level, sure, in response to the second Trump administration. Those on perhaps the pro-Trump side of things or the Republican Party side of things might view what's happening in the state of Virginia with the redistricting effort that is currently taking place as an example of the type of authoritarianism that defending democracy says that it is against. And I'm wondering just what are your thoughts regarding uh, the redistricting effort that is currently underway by the Democratic Party in Virginia to
That's
to
a great question because I
Mhm.
think there are two sides to that. Do I think it's right in terms of its adherence to democratic principles? No, I don't.
Mhm.
Do I think it's right in terms of fighting for democracy? Probably. That is, I think we're at a critical stage in this country. That is, those who seek a more centralized authoritarian governance have created a series of efforts to reduce the voting effectiveness of people in this country, either through gerrymandering, re-gerrymandering, I would say, which started in Texas, and has kind of, you know, we've created a gerrymandering war.
Mhm.
People should have known that was going to happen. You can't do this, and then California comes in, and then Illinois comes in, and blah blah blah. Virginia comes in, or we have, got legislation proposed that would literally restrict the ability of about 10 million people to vote. That is the so-called SAVE Act, where you want a national card in order to vote, to prove citizenship, which a number of people, given the short period of time that they would be required to get that, can't do. They don't have a passport. They can't find their birth certificate. Their birth certificate, which is their maiden name, doesn't match with their passport, which is a different name because they're married. And so that all has to be adjudicated, and the time to do that probably isn't sufficient. So, and again, I think this is where we would kind of, we being defending democracy, they kind of look at it in terms of what action is best for preserving democracy in this country and make a decision based on that, right?
Mhm.
I think there are legitimate arguments for both. I wish the gerrymandering wars hadn't started, um, but they have, and so there is, you know, a response from one generates a response from the other, and there's some people who argue. In fact, I think there was an article in Cardinal News, the group that you're associated with, in something that said basically if you kept the districts the same, Republicans would still have a difficult time winning in
Mhm.
this election. So, I mean, you want to take a chance, or um, I'm a little concerned with the way they have created maps that kind of, we jokingly refer to it as I think it's the sixth district now, would be the university district. It kind of goes from Radford to Blacksburg to, where James Harrisonburg to Charlottesville, kind
Yep.
of, you're picking up all of the kind of quote unquote pockets of liberalism in the state.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that is, you know, you have to think about what the implications of that are in the future. Fortunately, the amendment says this is temporary. It'll change. Um, I think to answer your question in the long run, I think after this election is over, we need to seriously think about changes in voting in this country and think about things like rank size voting in primaries. And what would that do? One of the things that has been shown in other states where you use that, you weed out the extremes on the right and the left. You tend to come with people who kind of come to the middle on issues. I think there's issues with regard to electoral colleges. Uh, that's a tough one because it requires a constitutional change. But historically, we were one state removed from passing a change in the Electoral College way back.
Hmm.
Um, so those are some of the things constitutionally that our founders said, yeah, it's imperfect, and we expect you to, grow into it and change. So
Yeah,
anyway, that's drifting a little bit far from your.
that's quite right. No, no, no. But I guess just kind of returning to the redistricting effort, it sounds like that you're, philosophically against it, but at the same time, almost like it's the lesser of two evils if by leaving it as is allows other states to gerrymander their states in order to,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's
So
unfortunate. It's unfortunate. I would say that's probably true. It's
yeah,
unfortunate we don't reach a point of common sense and say, everybody, let's step back from this and let's go with what we have. But we haven't reached that point yet.
yeah, yeah. Again, here on Buzz for Good with Jim Boland, who is a retired professor emeritus at Virginia Tech and on the steering committee of an organization called Defending Democracy, which, yeah,
Let
go
me,
ahead.
let me go back to the gerrymandering issue again.
Sure.
One of the things that happened in Hungary, which is a country that many of the current leaders kind of say, oh, I wish we could be like Hungary. Tucker Carlson thinks Hungary is, cut out of the holy cloth and veil.
Hmm.
Um, is they, once Orban was elected, one of the first things they did is redistrict and reallocate how the seats were elected in parliament.
Hmm.
It's a way to consolidate power. So if you look at what they did and how that led to a real consolidation of power in their legislative one, that's a lesson to be learned, I think, in terms of applying it to the redistricting.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay.
Okay. Is defending democracy, I mean, at its heart, you know, anti-Trump party or a group, anti-Republican, pro-democratic?
No, we're nonpartisan
Hmm.
by design. We don't endorse candidates. We just in all the events we've had, the pitch has basically been educate yourself, know what the issues are, get engaged. Here's some things to worry about.
Hmm.
Whether you see it on the right or the left, democracy is the issue. It's not a Democratic issue. It's not a Republican issue. It's a democracy issue. We're concerned about authoritarianism. We think we need to broaden the umbrella of democracy. I think it's, and I can't recall who it was, it may have been Winston Churchill, is said the best thing for improving democracy is more democracy, is to broaden the reach of people engaged in it. And that's really one of the things I think we see as our mission, get people involved.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What else did you come here wanting to share?
Well, just as I mentioned it earlier, but we have an event on the 12th. It's at UUC here in
You said
Blacksburg.
the 12th of April?
12th of April, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
April 12th.
From 2 to 4, it's called Protect the Vote, Threats to the Midterm Election. And we've got a panel of experts. One deals with two from Virginia Tech, one from the NAACP. We're talking about gerrymandering, and we're talking about what are some of the legislative attempts to restrict voting. Again, basically to educate people in terms
Hmm.
of what they are
Hmm.
and understand what's happening and make some recommendations, of what you can do. Work the polls, vote, um, be attentive to what's going on in your community. I think what we're worried about is a sense that authoritarians would like to nationalize our election when it's really the local governments and the state governments that should have and constitutionally have control over the election process. The closer you are to the ground, the better you can deal with election issues.
Hmm.
And I would argue that since 2020 in that election, many on the right have created an issue on fraud, voting fraud, etc., that doesn't exist. Most empirical work that's been done, almost all of it, I would say 98% of it, has demonstrated that voting is very secure in this country.
Well, that I can personally attest to, because in the 2024 and 2025, I was an election worker in my county,
Yeah.
and yeah, the safeguards that are in place, the checks, the balances, all of those things, it is nigh impossible to fraudulently cast a vote.
Yeah. And I would argue that that's exactly why it's local. That it's been safe.
Yeah, and that sadly, the cries of fraud only come about when one party loses.
Yeah.
This is never. I mean, there was nobody protesting fraudulent voting in 2024. Only in 2020.
Yeah, there's a great book called Tyranny of the Minority, which they argue one of the traditions in this country has always been, if you lose an election, you do it gracefully and you say, okay, we're turning the government over to the next group. But that tradition has really been kind of turned on its end.
Yeah.
How
about instead just convince me that your party is worth my vote?
Yeah.
By not only your words but your actions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So,
Well, it's been a delight talking with you.
Well, and you as well, James Boland, who is on the steering committee of Defending Democracy through the Unitarian Universalist Church. Thank you so much for coming on to Buzz for Good and sharing your work.
Thank you very much. We'll see you.
And that was my conversation with Jim Boland, one of the organizers of the group Defending Democracy. Next up on the show, as I mentioned at the start, we began a new production of our TV show Buzz this week, starring On Our Own of the Roanoke Valley, a drop-in center in Roanoke that is open 365 days a year for people struggling with addiction and mental health issues. Last fall, I had the opportunity to interview the executive director, Robin Hubert, about her personal journey from addiction to inspiration and how she uses that journey to help others who enter the doors of On Our Own, located in the Old Southwest neighborhood of Roanoke. So here is part of our conversation, and if you would like to hear the rest of the conversation, please visit my YouTube channel at Buzz for Good. All right, and it's my pleasure to welcome here to Buzz for Good, Robin Hubert, who is the executive director of On Our Own. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So for those who aren't familiar with On Our Own, what is it?
So On Our Own is a drop-in center for folks that are seeking recovery or support from mental health or substance use issues. And we are open every afternoon, 7 days a week. And that includes holidays. And it's a come and go kind of place. You don't have to check any boxes, or people can come and just, all we ask for people to do is just sign in and write their demographics, where they live and things like that. And then they can participate at whatever level they want. If they want to just kind of hang out and have a cup of coffee or a refreshment, they can do that. And they can participate in any of the groups that go on throughout the week, or they can just hang out and hopefully we have a library where they can just sit and read books, or we have a computer for folks that they can get on and use for short times during the day. We're not a place where people just come and use the computer and go. We want people to be able to socialize. And the different thing about On Our Own that's unique in this area is that everyone who works here is a person in long-term recovery. Everyone is trained as a peer recovery specialist, which means that their lived experience and recovery from either mental health, substance abuse, or both issues of those kinds give them the background, the ability to connect on a level of, I've been there, I've done that. And so it's a place where people can feel safe We don't we don't chart or take notes. It's a place for people to just come and be comfortable at just as they are.
Well, so what are some of the reasons why people would want to or feel the need to come to On Our Own?
So folks that are struggling with such issues maybe they have a counselor they go to once a week or once a month, whatever schedule. They might see a doctor. They might be on medications. They might be part of some clinical groups that maybe they're in treatment for something and they might be part of groups.
When we say in treatment for something, are we talking like mental health or addiction?
Both, either or. So people, some folks might be getting counseling or might be in a treatment, an outpatient treatment center where they're maybe going to groups a couple times a week. They might be getting counseling or some psychiatry, or if they're on medication. So that's all clinically focused. In other words, they're professionals that are either, a doctor or a counselor or case manager, and everybody has a purpose. We are very supportive of any kind of services that people want, that they make a choice to have. And the thing about us is that that appointment could be maybe once a week, once a month, maybe once every 3 months to see their doctor. We are here every single day. So we're a place to come where you can just come and get support.
Yeah.
You can come and participate. Some people find great value in volunteering. Some people say, hey, can I sweep the porch? Hey, do you want me to take out the trash? Hey, can I do something for you? And just the whole idea of being part of the On Our Own family is what it is when you come in here.
Yeah, community is so underrated these days and underappreciated. We're all kind of trapped in our own little isolated worlds, whether it's our home or on our phones, and just being that human connection, I've got to believe is a strong influence on mental health.
Yes.
And so like you said, you have an appointment with a counselor that's maybe once a week or once a month. Well, what do you do in between? Well, thankfully you've got a place like On Our Own where you can go and at least just be in communion and community with other folks who are facing similar challenges.
That's right.
Yeah. So once again, joined here on Buzz for Good by Robin Hubert, who is the executive director of On Our Own, which offers a center, a home, where folks are struggling with mental health issues, addictions, can come and visit every afternoon of the week, 7 days a week, no appointment needed, just stop in and get some human interaction and help that they might need to, move on to the next day.
That's right.
What inspired the creation of On Our Own?
Well, back in 1993, a group of folks that were doing well in their recovery, they were connected with counseling and case management and doctors, and they just wanted something outside of all of that to fellowship. And so they created with the help of the Community Services Board, people who believe that recovery is real and possible for everyone. They helped find grant money to start this up. And so it just became a place where folks would come, just like it is today. And if folks could come and people walk in the door, we don't say, hey, what's your diagnosis or why are you here or anything like that. We say, welcome. Hey, would you like a glass of iced tea or would you like a cup of coffee or a refreshment? Hey, have a seat, be comfortable. We don't take an application. We don't make anybody answer any questions. It's just a wonderful way to just be welcomed, and hospitality and truly caring about each other is something that that we strive to provide, and people do feel that.
Lovely. So you mentioned it was started with some grant funding. How is it funded these days?
Well, majority of the money does still come from a federal block grant. So we were renewed for this year as of October 1st. So we're still here. And that's been ongoing for all these years.
I see. Well, that's kudos to you for maintaining that federal grant, because so many nonprofits in the world these days, or at least in our country these days, have had their federal grants cut.
Sure, absolutely. And
What,
some things have been, but we also have contracts in the community with the regional partnership here, where we go in, we have 3 different contracts where we provide services. We provide peer services that show that recovery is possible. So in other words, we go into places like the hospital where people are inpatient, and we provide wellness classes at the same time of saying, hey, I've been there. I've been in this hospital. I've been through treatment for alcohol or drugs, and I am in recovery for, a time. And I'll tell you that you can do this. It's hard to think right now. And I was in the same place myself. I'm in recovery over 25 years. So I know what it's like to have been in that hospital, think I'm never going to get better. But we're there to hopefully instill some hope that recovery is possible.
yeah, well, I was going to ask you, what is your background that led you to this world?
Yeah, part of it is, as I said, I'm in recovery 25 plus years from alcoholism. I'm also in mental health recovery. I've had major depressive disorder. I was hospitalized between 85 and 99 about 10 times. And one of those, and then I went through a rehab for alcoholism. So I know what it's like to not only be hospitalized, but be in treatment program, to go to counseling, to have a case manager, to have a doctor, to be on psychiatric meds to help lift me out of the depression. And then as far as the substance abuse, we started out just a mental health recovery, but we know that both mental health and substance use, they go together so many times, because with a mental health issue, like with me, alcohol was kind of my medicine for a long time until I got some more tools and some good counseling, et cetera. So alcohol was my medicine, but it feeds into that dependency and then eventually turned into alcoholism. And so people turn to drugs and alcohol sometimes to relieve mental health symptoms. And then as people that have substance use issues, it just goes right along with it. They're going to have depression, anxiety, different things, hallucinations, things like that become a mental health problem as well. And so they go together, they feed into each other. And, both of the things, with the alcoholism or substance abuse and mental health, isolation is just feeds that and helps it to grow. So part of why we are such an important part of a person's recovery is that we have a place to come so that you're not isolated. You're not alone. You're with people who they may be struggling today. They may be struggling. They may have struggled yesterday. And the people who work here, as I said, are all in long-term recovery. So we have a basis of talking to folks and helping them choose what their next best thing to do is, giving them choices. So that's what makes such a huge difference, is knowing that I have a place to go and I'm not going to be kicked out or yelled at or, people aren't going to make funny faces at me. You're like, she's sick or whatever. We're going to just welcome you. Right? However you present, that's who you are. And that's who we welcome.
Well, Robin, thank you so much for the work that you're doing to help those experiencing some challenges in our community through On Our Own of Roanoke Valley.
Thank you for having me, Michael. It's been wonderful to talk to you. And thank you, listeners, for listening.
I look forward to sharing with you more in the coming weeks about our work highlighting and helping On Our Own of the Roanoke Valley. You can stay tuned to our website, buzzforgood.com, as well as our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, all at Buzz for Good, to stay up to date on that episode, as well as all of the work that we're doing, highlighting and helping nonprofit organizations. Thank you so much for tuning in today to Buzz for Good, and we look forward to seeing you back here next time. Until then, continue being a buzz for good in the community you hold dear, and supporting those nonprofits that are working tirelessly each and every day, making your community an even better place to live. Bye now.